being located in a place that has such a vibrant sauna culture where there's multiple sauna stove companies you can look at to get one made, where you live.
When I'm picking out my materials, staying local is a big thing for me.
Can you explain what hunting camps are and kind of the sauna culture around hunting camp?
In the case of my family, it was a barn that was torn down nail by nail and then rebuilt in a swamp.
So there's your ventilation right
Sure.
there. It's not a little hole there somewhere where it's supposed to be, and if you don't have it that very spot, you're screwed.
Guess who's coming to sauna? Hekilunta. Guess who's coming to sauna? Hekilunta.
So this is Eero with the upper bench. I'm still in Finland. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be here a couple of weeks longer, and I'm at my in-laws' place, and we've been doing some recording here. But it's been great. This was the third day here, the third sauna day also. So Sam, what are you up to?
Oh, I'm living in it down here in the south. It is a balmy 90 degrees with about 60, over 60% humidity. So you can about imagine that's a pretty high dew point. So, but I'm still going to jump in the sauna later because there's nothing better than, getting out and it does feel a little bit cooler, but definitely feeling it today. So the AC is pumping, but I'm excited for our conversation today. Risto, what is happening and who are we talking to?
Well, in my world, I've got sauna scheduled with my brother-in-law this evening, so I'm looking forward to that. And then we just recorded our first Upper Bench live stream where any of our listeners could just call in could dial in and we could chat about sauna stuff. So that was a lot of fun yesterday. And I look forward to doing more of those. And I'm excited for our guests today because they're from what I consider like the epicenter of sauna in North America, which is up in the Upper Peninsula. And I'll let them tell us more about where they're from. But it's Haley and Cody Goodrow, and I met Haley at Sauna Week, which was earlier in the year. So where they live, there's just tons of saunas, and our family loves to travel up there. So I'll let you guys tell us about the area where you're at and what your background with sauna is.
So we're in Hancock, Michigan, which is in the Keweenaw Peninsula, which is also in the Upper Peninsula. So a peninsula on a peninsula. But yeah, we're up here. Yeah, I know Risto's got his Michigan hands up, showing where we're located. My background with sauna is I didn't grow up with sauna culture, but when I moved to the UP and went to school up here is kind of where I was introduced to that, like in the way where it's very specific to Upper Peninsula sauna being very much part of the culture. And then Cody and I met, and his family, he grew up with sauna. He's a Youper, so there's that.
Sauna's always kind of been a staple in my family culture. My grandparents had a sauna, and they were direct neighbors with my parents. And so 3 nights out of the week, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays or Saturdays, my grandpa would call the house and wouldn't say hello or anything. Someone would pick up and he'd say sauna's hot, and he'd hang up and he'd walk over to his house about 30 minutes later.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so I grew up with it and then spent the last 5 to 10 years without one. And the reason you didn't meet me at Sauna Week is because I refused to go enjoy other people's saunas while mine was still being built. So I was actually at home working on building ours instead of enjoying someone else's.
I can definitely, that's a man after my heart there. Yeah, I can't start a project and go figure out something else. No, I gotta keep going. So how's it coming along in the build? How far along are you?
We're ready to put the metal roof on. I'm putting in an order for some windows. We've got like a 3 foot by 4 foot window in the hot room, and then a smaller transom window in the changing room. So everything's framed up, just last steps to get it weather tight. And I've got bags of insulation sitting in there waiting to get stapled up. So kind of getting to that point where I don't need a second set of hands on everything. We're starting to close the gap
close.
there. It's been a slow weekend warrior kind of project. I started it in January, and now we're at the point of getting it weather tight. So tar paper's on, waiting for the metal roofing. waiting for windows to come in, and I've got all the interior stuff just sitting in there waiting to be thrown up. The goal is to do as bare minimum as I can to get it weather tight and then finish the hot room so I can, start using it, because there's nothing more infuriating than spending a whole Saturday working on a sauna and then not being able to sauna when you're done working on that sauna.
Yeah, it's the first thing you want after a hard day. I know that I know that feeling. When I was building mine in my shop, I made sure that that last weekend push, I at least had enough time to use it maybe the day after.
Yeah.
Yeah. So every sound enthusiast is going to want to know what stove that you've got.
We just met with our stove makers this week, actually.
Yeah, so we're going with a local weld shop, Larry Anderson at Anderson and Sons down in Chassel. They do a really nice solid stove with a bunch of options, and we're gonna have them weld added baskets on the sides to get as much stone on there as possible. We kicked around the idea of doing some of the real high end, nice like an Iki, but based on where I was at budget wise with the things I wanted to pick and choose on, I was like, you know what? I just want a sauna. I don't want to, I don't want to drag this out any more than I need to. So
yeah. Well, and also like being located in a place that has such a vibrant sauna culture where there's multiple sauna stove companies you can look at to get a one made, where you live. Like, I feel like it just made sense for us to choose one that is based in our area, and try to support our people locally. So it was nice that we had that option even.
Yep.
But
yeah, I love that we have high end, really nice stoves that people can get a hold of, but we need more of that local. Your stove doesn't have to be perfect. A lot of these high end stoves these days, the prices have just shot up so high that you could almost build a sauna for the price of the stove.
Oh yeah.
that's crazy.
Yeah, and it's funny because I mean the culture around saunas completely changed where the saunas I grew up with were quickly thrown together welded stoves from a shop down the road and just bare bones ingredients to put the thing together. And now obviously saunas switch more from like utilitarian bathing culture to more recreational, at least in this area. I don't know nationwide, but I'm trying to strike the balance between the two, make something that's beautiful and something that I'm proud of, but also something that is what it is, and it's more utilitarian than not.
I like that. I really like to think with my sauna, I'm a very much a fan of the DIY community and doing things maybe a little bit on a budget. But when I'm picking out my materials, staying local is a big thing for me. I love the fact that you're able to use a local weld shop that has the capability, the knowledge, and at least, probably all those guys that I know what they're doing after they build your sauna stove. They're going to go use a sauna. So
Yeah.
to have somebody like that in your backyard is invaluable. And so very, very cool. And I can't wait to see pictures of the final build.
Oh yeah, it was super fun to meet with them too. It hasn't been brought up yet in this episode, but I mentioned this to Risto before we were recording, and I'm working on a book about saunas of the Upper Peninsula. And so we actually met with our sauna stove maker to talk about saunas in the area that we could go and photograph for the book. But naturally, of course, we can't not talk about our sauna build because we're so excited about it. But that definitely came up into conversation when we met with them. But yeah.
And we should shout out Larry. Larry, you can't like turn over the sauna rock especially the Keweenaw area without finding Larry. He's just like shows up everywhere up there.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh. He has a crazy awesome list. He's like been collecting a list of saunas that he's visited for like a very long time, and is very passionate about sauna culture, and is very, very fun to talk to. But so that was kind of a fun conversation. But
Yeah.
So let me see here. I mean, Cody, you grew up in the UP. Haley, you're a transplant. So tell us how you got into sauna. Was it through Cody or was it just from being up there in the UP?
Yeah, it's kind of a mix of ways, probably both of those things for sure. Like first introduction, I had lived in the Marquette area and that it's prevalent there, but it's not prevalent in the same way that it is in the Keweenaw. And when I met Cody, I was kind of introduced to what sauna culture was like with his family and being brought into that and seeing it from a familial and like traditional perspective of kind of how it has been for his family. And then when I moved to the Keweenaw, I actually worked at Finlandia University before it closed down, and that was a probably like the biggest influence for me to get super into sauna culture, but also learn so much more about like Finnish American culture, having worked at Finlandia. So I learned a lot about the Finnish culture from that. I'm myself am not Finnish. Cody's family is all Finnish, but yeah, so that was kind of how I got into the subject, and then I realized that there weren't a lot of people taking pictures of current saunas and kind of documenting the culture. And I'm a photographer and I'm really interested in storytelling. So it just felt like a natural fit for me to kind of pursue a project related to that. But yeah, there's just so many stories and so like pretty much every single sauna that we've visited and photographed, every single one of them could have their own full-length story written about it because there's just it's just so interesting. Everybody has something that they can bring from a story perspective, especially I mean, they all have such personalization up here because they were built with kind of like a DIY mentality. A lot of them were and it was just like a necessity to an extent with some of the families. It was just the thing that you did, and you built it sometimes before you built your house, and it was where you bathed, and it was where you cooked your food, and it was where you stayed warm while you were building your house. So yeah, it's just it's definitely a rabbit hole that I've gone down, and I'm really happy I went down. But there's just so much to know about sauna and culture in this area, and it's been fun to be here and experience that. So
Wonderful.
So when you were using it, obviously you knew what saunas were before you came up there. But when
mhm.
was your first clue as you're using it up in the UP that maybe there's something different about this? Was it the heat? Was any nakedness experience? Usually there's some clue where someone's like, "Oh, this is different."
Yeah, Cody and I both just laughed and looked at each other because I'm pretty sure he knows the story I'm probably about to tell. But with Cody's family, he mentioned like the Monday, Wednesday, Saturdays tradition and it being very much a family thing and everyone going to his grandparents' sauna. So it was like maybe one of the first or second times I'd hung out with Cody's family and they had the sauna going. And some people's families are a lot more traditional in how they like to approach sauna. And so I was sitting in his grandpa's living room with his grandparents and I was like, "All right, like when are we going in the sauna? Like let's do it." And they were very traditional with like married couples going in together and then you'd go in by yourself if you weren't married yet. So it was just that was almost like probably the most blatant example I can think of, but then having been invited to use other people's saunas and then seeing how that tradition changes based on who you're with. And some of these topics are what I'm trying to broach in this book because there's so many complexities with how people approach sauna in this area and how it depends on the family. It depends on a lot of different things, people's comfort with like being in the sauna and not wearing any clothes. Like it just depends on the person and their comfort level or their family's tradition. So that was probably the most blatant example I can think of, but everyone's got their own way of doing it. Some people really, really, really want to have the cold plunge as an aspect. So that seems to be really important to some people. And some people really find that bathing is necessary to have a good sauna. So yeah, it just kind of it depends. And there's so many intricacies. It's very interesting.
That's very interesting to me because I didn't grow up with the American style of sauna, and I wonder what's the difference between the Upper sauna and the Finnish sauna that I grew up with. And everything you say so far is sounds extremely familiar, but I wonder, like, did we like grow together in different continents when it comes to sauna, or if we didn't?
It's so
It,
it's so interesting to think about that because where it started and how it like has evolved between the two places over time differently. Yeah, there's somebody that I just spoke with a couple weeks ago. Actually, her name is Laura Rulo, and she's just starting research on that topic with Michigan Tech, and she is wanting to broach the subject of how sauna culture has evolved from like current day Finland versus old Finnish, and then how that has been brought into the UP environment. So yeah, there's a lot of people who are interested in this topic here that are broaching the subject in different ways, whether it's through research or creative projects.
And also how it expands, because I lived my first 39 years in Finland, and then coming to New York, I live close to New York City, and there I'm offending some people now, but there's no like do it yourself kind of culture. So we don't have anybody welding heaters next door. So it's more like the infrared kind of sauna, whatever that means, kind of an experience that I'm used to there where I'm now.
It's my understanding that the bathing practice maybe changed a little bit, where in Finland, and I don't know what time frame, maybe the 70s and 80s, that the bathing aspect, the shower moved out of the hot room, especially for saunas in the cities, whereas in the UP, like we've seen in our Upper episodes, there's so many that have a shower in the hot room.
Or at least running water in the hot room. It may not be like a full-blown shower setup, but definitely a copper pipe with a faucet on it. I've seen that a million times in a UP sauna.
Yeah, in fact,
Yeah.
growing up with that, I actually found it strange when I started experiencing other people's saunas outside the UP and seeing the advent of just like a hot room basically that you walk out of. And I was like, so you just walk out sweaty and then you go find a shower somewhere else? It just seems so weird to me. Granted, now that's what we're building, because we've got a standalone sauna, and I'm kind of too lazy to run water up there right now. But
Yeah, ours is tucked back in the woods a little bit, so yeah, the running water, I don't think it's that you're lazy. It's just we live literally on the top of a rock bluff, and so digging down into the earth is really hard.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
right, yeah. If anybody doesn't know much about this area, it's known as the Copper Country. So it's very rocky. And yeah, so it can be kind of tough to dig down. So I don't think
Yeah.
that it's because you don't want running water. I just think that it's
Yeah.
its own
Oh,
challenge.
and how, I mean, it wouldn't be difficult to put a spigot on the outside that you could hook up a garden hose to. You could run one to it, and then it'd be temporary, unhook it, and then you're winterizing it too.
Yeah, and that's a good
Mhm.
point. We actually do something very similar out at our family's hunting camp. That sauna is fully rustic, and what we do is when we turn the well on to fill up the hunting camp with water, we run a garden hose, and there's a big 50-gallon drum in the sauna. Then you can ladle out and put that into another bowl on the bench.
You might have to explain that. That's going to be maybe perhaps a little bit of a difference between Finland and the UP as well, and the UP and the broader American culture. Can you explain what hunting camps are and kind of the sauna culture around hunting camp?
Yeah, so when you refer to hunting camp in the UP, whitetail deer hunting is a strongly prominent cultural symbol up here. From November 15th to the end of the month, people migrate out to sometimes, they're nice cottages, sometimes they're shacks in the woods. In the case of my family, it was a barn that was torn down nail by nail and then rebuilt in a swamp. Yeah, there's a whole backstory with that, but it's effectively a barn with a bunch of bunk beds and a wood stove that you know somewhere between 4 and 12 guys all pile into for a week or two every year and try to be rugged woodsmen. Pretend to be rugged woodsmen for 2 weeks, and as part of that, and a lot of these family hunting camps come with a sauna, and so there's this whole culture that gets dragged along and instituted there as well. And sauna culture is really strong there. There's a lot of good stories and laughs and fun memories just around guys getting the sauna hot, sitting outside the hot room, taking turns in the sauna, drinking beers in between it. Yeah. So really interesting subset of hunting culture.
Oh, absolute necessity.
Yeah, and they'll usually just refer to it as camp.
Yep. It is the same. I find that, I mean, I find that in northern Wisconsin and even in northern Minnesota too. The hunting camp sauna, I think, really does serve that multiple purpose. Hey, we don't have running water here, but guess what? I can still have a hot sauna and get
Yep.
cleaned up. And you know what? It's gonna be 20 degrees that night, so why not?
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, if you're lucky. So yeah, I mean, it's a great time, and it is. It's such a bonding ritual, especially you're up there, you're cleaning up. You've had a long day. You're unwinding with family and friends. Those are the best stories. Those are the best times. So
Yeah.
I hope everybody gets a chance to enjoy that at some point.
What's with the hunting camps? And so how do you rinse yourself in those hunting camp saunas?
So in the instance of my families, we do have a well out there that runs off a generator, and so we'll fill up buckets. But before we know we're going to light the sauna, we'll fill up some buckets, and then we'll just do a bucket rinse on the bench.
Okay. Yeah, so it's pretty much the same. It's pretty much
Yeah,
the same. If you have a, I bet that when it's a hunting camp, it's a different thing. But the Finns at least used to try to build a sauna next to a pond or a lake
sure.
or whatever, like in this case, a river. And so you basically get all your water from there.
Mm.
But obviously a well is just as good.
Yep.
Yeah, and just, for our listeners who haven't been up there to kind of understand, up in the UP is very much like there's a do it yourself because you have to in a survival culture. I don't know how accurate this is, but I heard that some Amish had tried to live up there but ended up moving. I don't know if 300 of inches of snow in the winter was too difficult, but it's the kind of place where you drive down the side of the road and you see a little sign that someone wrote and it says, with their phone number on it, it says deer skull boiling. So, it's very much part of the culture up there.
Yeah, that deer skull boiling sign that's in the Keweenaw, just in between Calumet and Hancock, you'll pass it. It's become kind of iconic in this area.
Mhm.
Yeah, some people just took the design and made a sticker out of it. It's pretty funny, or a t-shirt. You see it around yeah. It's an inside joke for this area, I'd say. But
It is funny though, because growing up here, I understand the joke now, and like if someone explained it to me, I'd see the humor in it. But if I was driving by myself down a road and I saw a sign that said deer skull boiling, I wouldn't think twice about it. I'd be like, oh, there's a guy that, you know, cleans up your deer skulls after you shoot them in the after hunting camp.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, that's iconic. That is, I mean, and to anyone else, like you said, they would absolutely get in a car wreck driving by that if they saw it anywhere else in the United States. But up there, that is a way of life. Whitetail hunting and sauna. I love that connection. And I'd love to, bring on our friend Bobby, who we talked to yesterday, and his connection with especially with hunting and a nippy. And where that traces back, hunting and sauna, it's got to go back tens of thousands of years,
Of course.
to staying warm and being nomadic and, building your small little smoke sauna while you chase either a herd or wherever you're at. Doesn't matter if you're in North America or Northern Europe. You were still just trying to stay warm and stay fed. So I love that connection and how we maintain it today. But yeah, Haley, I've seen some of your photography. I love it. Tell me about some of the cool saunas or maybe have a couple of photos that you'd like to share. We'd love to see maybe some insights on maybe your process and what you look for in a fun sauna photo shoot.
yeah, sure. We kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, the variation of sauna that exists and how it's evolved over time in the UP and how there are different levels of fancy sauna, but then very DIY. And there's such a spectrum that exists up here, which is something that I super appreciate. And so with someone that approaches me or I get a story lead for a sauna, I'm pretty open-minded to what the sauna is gonna be. If it's electric, I mean, personal preference is wood fired for sure. But you know, practicality is definitely something to be mentioned. And so there's lots of different kinds. So when agreeing to do a photo shoot for the book, Saunas of the Upper Peninsula, I'm just kind of like open to the experience and you just kind of see what is going to happen. And in general, most of the time, you pretty much have a good story. Yeah, I'll just share some of the ones that I've photographed. So my my goal is to photograph 85 saunas in the Upper Peninsula.
Which is not hard, really. It's
No.
just
Yeah, even just honestly, even just in Hancock alone, there's probably 85 saunas that you could photograph. But I'm trying to show like the spectrum that exists along, you know, the different kinds that are around this area because there are so many. Let me just get this folder pulled up with some of the pictures. But yeah, one of my most, well, I think they're all my favorite. Every single one I visit, there's just something interesting about it, and there's something that I really like. Um, but one of the ones I just visited probably a month ago at this point, it was out in Oscar Bay in the Keweenaw Peninsula, and the guy used an old pop-up camper, some of the bones from a pop-up camper, and built walls around it, but then used the top of the Coleman pop-up as a way to make a sauna, and it is probably one of the coolest ones I've ever seen.
Yeah, I saw a video recently of you know, some guys. It was, I don't know if it was in Ukraine or Russia, but these guys were driving around in an old busted out Volvo that they had converted the back seat into a sauna, a wood burning sauna, and the car still drove.
Oh my gosh.
And so it was pretty awesome looking, but definitely captured that DIY spirit.
Oh man, you know, I had a video pop up on my social media recently of somebody who converted a limo to a sauna.
Plenty of room, plenty
Like,
of room. Yeah.
yeah, it was a limo they could drive, which felt like a lot of things could go wrong with that situation, but
Well,
yeah,
there's our
okay.
next business opportunity. We're gonna do the upper bench. We're gonna have party limos, and we're gonna just bring the sauna to you. Okay, yeah, we can see
Yeah.
these photos now.
Um, this is on Oscar Bay. And yeah, they're definitely a finished descent, as you can see. But you can see in this photo like the top of this red sauna right on the canal, the Portage Canal on the Keweenaw has a Finnish flag hanging from it. It's really cute little red guy, and it's got yeah, the plastic top from the pop-up. And then there's the stove coming out on the top. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, and then you can see Kevin in the photos kind of lounging on the left side of the image, staring at his sauna.
Yeah, they kept it on the trailer, so I mean, it looks like that thing, you know, they maybe put a little insulation or something to maybe keep the critters out from underneath it. But it's definitely still it looks like it's still mobile. So maybe slap some new tires on that and you could get that thing down the road, I bet.
Yeah, here this one you can see the actual Coleman top a little bit closer and how
Cool.
There you go.
how it was so repurposed from a pop-up. You can definitely see it in this image here.
I think what really should be highlighted too is the pride in that man's eyes looking at his sauna. You know, there's a
Yeah.
certain amount of pride in looking at your own sauna.
Mhm.
Well, and I know exactly what he's looking at. He's looking at the top of that roof cap, and he's thinking about how he almost fell off the ladder trying to put it together, and he was cussing, and but he made it, and now he's just proud.
Yeah, he is very proud in this picture. Here's another side angle. In this image, you can see the front has the wood
Oh,
siding,
cool.
bare wood, and then you can see a small little door on the side here that you can take off and put on to, you know, insulate where the stove, the feeder is at. So it's an outside feeding stove, but
FYI, Coleman, anyone from Coleman who's watching, we're looking for some product placement.
right. So the thing with this photo shoot specifically, the Coleman pop-up camper on Oscar Bay, his name is Kevin that I went and talked with, and naturally the interview goes way more than an hour, which I'm perfectly happy with. I ended up sitting there talking with him for about 3 hours, a little bit over 3 hours. And something that's really cool about Oscar Bay is that it was mostly Finnish immigrants that started that whole community. And he grew up there. The road that his house is on is named after his last name, and it's just a very much a community situation. But the sauna that he was born in was just down the road. And then I only went there to photograph the Coleman sauna, but I ended up photographing 3 because he had 2 other ones close by that he like close by as in like down the street, like as in right by, and he mentioned 5 other ones I think that were within less than a mile away. So if we're talking about like just purely how many exist in the area, I don't know if that illustrates that, but there are just so many. But yeah, this one is his sauna room. This is his stove set up in his house sauna, and it's a Nippa.
And so, yeah, and for any of our viewers or listeners, if you're not familiar with that brand of stove, that started in the UP, right?
Mm-hmm. Bruce Cross.
But now they've moved down to Lower Michigan.
Yeah. And then inside of the Coleman trailer. So here's the changing room.
And for the listeners here, we've got a very rustic indoors. Let me look at this sauna. Looks like old, uh, really, what you think that's hand milled lumber? I mean, that's old school. I mean, it's definitely rough cut lumber. You've got some very cool old driftwood as accent pieces to hold up a towel or your robe. We've got the old classic plastic milk crate with your soaps and shampoos. You can't go wrong with a milk crate. They are indestructible, people. Get yourself a milk crate. You won't forget it. But yeah, very cool. Yeah, it looks very DIY. And again, this thing is made out of an old Coleman pop-up camper, and this thing would rival any sauna probably within a 200-mile radius of where I live.
Yeah, he was very proud of also the DIY aspect of this. He mentioned that a lot, just using what he had available to him. He had found some cedar tongue and groove on Facebook Marketplace, I think.
Good for him.
Yeah. So he's just kind of using what he has.
And in the UP, you can just be driving along and on the side of the road see someone with kind of a small wood mill setup. There's tons of those up there.
Here's a better image of how the stove fits into the sauna. So the outside feeder a little bit close up, and then you can see that door, how it gets pushed over.
I mean, that looks, very very DIY. You've got some fire brick, insulating this kind of cut out little nook. It almost looks like like a doggy door you would cut out, for a shed or your cat, house to go in and out of. But the little insulated door you can then put on top of that for when it's really cold.
Yeah, we've kind of got a spectrum of different ones. This is from Hakenpaiva this year, which is
Cool.
a festival. We have a part of the Finnish American Heritage Center in Hancock. This guy's doing a belly flop.
What is the name of that festival again?
Hakenpaiva.
So can you explain what those words mean?
Yeah, I actually don't know if I can. I'm not sure if I think it may have just been a name. I don't know. Maybe Arrow could speak to that better than me. Does that mean in Finnish?
Well, actually, I don't know the origin, but obviously Heikki is a first name, and
Mhm.
Päivä. So back home here, they still have name days, and it might have started as that was Heikki's name day, like birthday, but name day,
Okay.
and it's just like they just like celebrating Heikki.
So now thinking about the origin, Heikki, if the name is Heikki, the festival is like our winter festival. And it was originally the Finlandia University's winter festival. Now it's the Finnish American Heritage Center's winter festival. But yeah, there's probably an origin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's probably in the 70s. We had a light winter here in the UP, and so a local radio host came up with his own Finnish folklore, and that Heikki Lunta, the snow god, needed to make it snow so that there could be a snowmobile race at the local club. And so he wrote a song that played on the radio to do the Heikki Lunta snow dance. And the story goes that it snowed and snowed, and now it's a credible origin story for Heikki Lunta, the snow god. And so as part of Heikinpäivä, someone dresses up as Heikki Lunta and dances in front of the parade.
Yeah, and there's also a bunch of characters from the Kalevala, I may be saying that wrong, that show up in the parade for Heikinpäivä, because there's a parade every year. So yeah, it's its own little thing up here. It's kind of fun.
That's interesting. I've never heard that Heikki Lunta. I've understood that, and actually we have a song that we play that it talks about Heikki Lunta. But I at some point I thought it was Heikki Lunta, but it's Lunta, which is obviously snow. Very interesting. And I'm actually I'm quite familiar with what you're talking about, because I am involved with Finlandia Foundation in New York. Whatever happened there with the Finlandia University and all that stuff, I'm very, very familiar with that stuff. So interesting. Awesome.
And I believe this portion with the sauna was new this year, right?
Yeah. So they had, I mean, of course, just like everywhere, there's a kind of a resurgence of sauna, or just becoming more popular across the world, I would say. But yeah, there's a lot more mobile saunas here, and people manufacturing and building mobile saunas. And so as part of Heikinpäivä this year, they had a mobile sauna set up in a cold plunge pool that they had filled with water, so you could jump in and go and take a sauna. It was pretty great. It was pretty fun. There was an announcer talking about all the people cold plunging, and yeah, in this image, there's a guy belly flopping, and then in the background you can see a couple of mobile saunas. So yeah.
What would you say the temperature was that day?
Oh, well, you were working on the sauna. I was at the festival.
Yeah, I would say mid-20s Fahrenheit.
Yeah, so that's going to be a chilly dip. No, that's really cool. There's some great, cool DIY. You can tell these are up and coming, small business saunas behind them. They've got just enough of a form and finish to be a little bit upscale from DIYville. But very cool looking event.
Yeah. I really look forward to Heikinpäivä every year. It's probably my favorite festival that we have here. And then here's our sauna that we're working on. Ours doesn't look like this anymore, but you can kind of get an idea for the size of what we're building. So
it's built on a cedar deck. It's 8 foot wide, 16 foot long, 8 foot high ceiling. So it's split right down the middle, 8x8 changing room, 8x8 hot room. So this was probably back in March or April when we were putting up the walls.
What do you do for drainage in the hot room then with the cedar decking?
So I did a 1/8 inch gap between all the boards, and then I'm actually going to put in a floor drain too. And I think for the most part, it's not going to be our primary bathing center, so we're not going to have a bunch of water pooling up. So I think we should be good with what's there. I mean, this was partially born out of necessity, partially born out of me wanting to rush into it and start building something midwinter. So I wasn't going to be putting down a concrete slab and putting in a drain in January.
You know what they say, make saunas while Heikki Lunta sleeps.
yeah.
Very cool. No, in this picture here, we've got just some really nice cedar boards going up. And yeah, you can see just the little bit of gapping there. That's awesome. Let it breathe, people. Don't be afraid to let it breathe.
Let it breathe.
Yeah, and I'm still interested to see how this performs when we've got a strong northeast wind and it's blowing up under those deck boards. I'm hoping at that point we'll have, enough snow to insulate it underneath, but I've talked to enough people who've done a similar setup, and they said, it's not any different than trying to heat up a 4-inch concrete slab in the middle of winter that's been sitting cold at 10 degrees for 3 days. So
that's a great point. And a lot of people don't talk about that is if you are pouring a slab and you're in a climate with a pretty staunch winter, you're going to be heating up some cold concrete for a long time before you can really achieve some of the temperatures that you want to achieve out of a good sauna. So that's a great point. because I struggled. I even struggle with that. You know, my sauna is built on top of a concrete slab, even down here in the southeast part of the US. And I have a tremendous amount of heat sink into the brick and the concrete below. So I mean, that concrete can never get above really 80 degrees, even if I tried. I could be burning at my stove as hot as I possibly could, and that concrete just isn't going to get any hotter than that because it is leaching into the ground just as fast as I can put it into it.
Yeah, well, one of the gifts that Cody's mom got us for Christmas this year too, to kind of inspire us again to start building our sauna, is was also a sauna building book, which is like one of the classic sauna books. What is it called? Do you remember the name?
It's the art of sauna building.
The Art of Sauna Building.
Oh,
Yep.
okay, that one. Okay. Who's that one's?
Isn't that the Jalas Jaws book? Olavi Byrne,
Okay. Okay.
Olavi Jalas Jaw, I believe.
Yeah, and so, growing up with sauna, you get fixated on certain design features and stuff. So that book was actually, even though it's short and it's simple and kind of cuts out a lot of the fat, it really narrows down on what's important to sauna, and then kind of helps you build up from there. So it's been a useful reference guide, even for someone who has spent his whole life being in a sauna. There was design features that are brought up that I didn't grow up with, and so there was things that I learned about. I mean, airflow for one. The sauna that my grandparents' sauna did not have proper ventilation, and had I not read the book or been listening to podcasts like this or other podcasts like Glenn over at Sauna Times, and learning about some of those important features, I probably would have overlooked it and missed out on valuable features to incorporate.
Absolutely. No, and that's just it. There's good information out there. We definitely don't want to hide good sauna information from anybody. We want to make sure that it is accessible and approachable. The last thing you want is a super technical guide to, hey, you got to be 2 inches from here and 3 centimeters from this. And I do think, getting people a good foundation. And if you've got any sort of, construction, common sense, you can understand, the basic principles of insulating a room and then making sure that room can breathe and then heating it and maybe and take a step back and what is it going to do when it gets heated up? What is it going to do when it cools down? And just taking into some of the basic principles of construction, and with that book and with other books like it, I do think it is a lot more approachable than people realize. You're not building, some crazy structure. You're really building an insulated room that is gonna withhold some heat. Maybe I'm oversimplifying it. I love tinkering. I love talking to people that are willing to go out there and try it and build something themselves, because the best sauna you'll ever go into is one you built yourself. I firmly believe that with my whole heart. So
Cool in the sense that, they're this small compartmentalized little room, and even though there's certain features you need to incorporate, you have so much design freedom to make it your own, that I actually found myself getting stuck in analysis paralysis. You want it to be just perfect, and you want the window to be, sized and positioned exactly how you want it, because it's small enough. You have that ability. You have the ability to decide the size of the bench and the layout of the bench and directions, and there's something fun about having that level of control. It's like having a little miniature house that you can customize and tailor to your own liking.
exactly. And you can go just as far in one end or the other. If you want to go off the deep end and get fancy and do crazy stuff, you absolutely can. Or if you want to quick run up to your hunting land with a couple of sheets of plywood and some 2x4s, you can probably build something in a weekend that's gonna maybe probably do a decent job.
Yeah. Well, and it's been cool having talked to so many people who have built their saunas now, that we've gotten something from, like, I feel lucky because we've gotten certain features from people we've talked to, and we've tried to apply that to what we're doing because we're in the middle of building ours. So from a timing perspective, it's been pretty great to be able to talk to all these people. The one that Cody's pulling up right now is based in Gwynn, Michigan, and it's a sauna right on a lake. So they are very cold plunge oriented, but something that they had as a feature inside of their sauna that we're totally gonna do in ours is our benches are gonna be pretty big. Like, they're gonna be very wide, wide benches, and they're going to be two stacked on each other, but like a lot wider than you would think. Like how wide are you feeling? What was the measurement again?
Probably do 24 inches on top. Enough room to stretch out and feel like you have some space and that you don't have to sit upright the whole time. But the reason I pulled this up is you said a lot of guys can go out to their camp and throw up a sauna over a weekend. Randy, the owner, and his wife,
Libby. Yeah.
He was telling us the whole backstory of this, and he had some ongoing health issues and he wanted to build a sauna and couldn't, and so he had a whole community of friends and family come over, and they actually built this sauna, I think in a single day or maybe 2 days.
Yeah, he had all of the materials he had been gathering over time, but then he had gotten his back injury.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah, so they all built it for him so he could use this sauna to help with healing his back.
That's awesome.
And the amount of personality here that's infused in it is just crazy. You can't, because of the shadow, you can't quite see the sign up here, but the name of it is the Naked Church of Mother Nature.
I love it.
And of course, it's a sign that they had made and painted and put together themselves. And the posts holding up the frame of on the porch section are these really big wood burls that he had collected over time and made a point to save for his sauna when they built it. So
Yeah, for our listeners, make sure you come and check out these images after listening to the podcast, because I know sometimes we get some hate, hey, you guys, I can't see through my podcast. But no, please, we'll have some links down here, on our videos, so you can come and check some of this stuff out, because it is really cool to see a community come together and build something DIY, but really something that's going to withstand a lifetime. That's awesome.
I think some of the things too that I like to get caught up in with saunas is the details that exist in all of them and how they're very different depending on which sauna it is.
So Haley, during the photo shoots that you've been doing, is there a general idea of the saunas? Is there some common denominators, or is your feeling that they are very, very different depending on who built the sauna, where the sauna is? Like, what's your take on at this point of your project, what's your take on these saunas?
It depends on when it was built, it feels. Like the more modern, the most recent ones I would say that we've seen that are new are, as far as like materials that are chosen and color schemes, even like the more luxury kind of, like it seems like the newer ones that are built feel like more luxury, if that makes sense. Like, would you agree?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of design features that are similar in saunas that have been built, even strictly post-COVID. I think the internet culture has spawned, and this happens in most things, or in most industries right now, is that there's a lot of commonality just because a lot of people, you type in sauna on Google and you see 4 types of high-end saunas that all have very similar design features, and they're like, well, that's what I'm going to build. Whereas even 10 years ago, people were just like, I'm going to build a sauna, and how it looks is how it's going to look. And so there's definitely a lot more character and individuality as saunas get older and older.
Yeah, even within what you find in the changing room, I guess the changing room is a feature that I've seen very widely throughout this area. I mean, it's not very common that you'd find a detached sauna, so not in your house, that doesn't have a changing room. Like most of them here have a changing room, unless it's a barrel sauna. But even some of the barrel sauna designs do have a little tiny section where there's a changing room. Yeah, I would say that that's pretty much a feature that you mostly find across the board.
But yeah, when it comes to actually like screening the type of saunas, I mean, you've been all over the board. I mean, you've done the camper, you've done, what was the old smoke sauna out in...
Oh yeah, we went and visited an old Savu sauna. We don't have any functioning Savu saunas up here at the moment, but I'm bringing Larry's name back up because he is interested in building a Savu sauna at some point, which I think would be awesome. But yeah, we've kind of visited like across the board, like lots of different kinds. Electric sauna in someone's house, like sauna that it was wood fired in a basement. yeah, just there's such a spectrum that exists. So yeah, but I would say that the feature of it being partly used for cleanliness seems to be pretty prevalent still.
But I think that's also part of the point of the book, is to show, yes, there's a lot of value in some of these new modern Pinterest style saunas. You know, they're beautiful, but sauna is really accessible and it really can mold to your own life. And so having a swath shown in a single book, all of really beautiful photos that show that full spectrum, kind of shows how accessible and how there is a spectrum for anyone out there looking to get into it.
Right, yeah, it doesn't need to be a luxury sauna. Like it can be approachable regardless of, your price range. You can make it happen. Definitely.
Oh,
It
100%. Yeah, with the DI, I mean the DIY crowd, especially if you're handy and if you want to, try to just even a small project. It doesn't have to be this giant, 16 by 16 room or anything like that. But I do think it is a lot more accessible than people realize, especially if you're on a budget. I built one. Now, granted, this was a few years back and lumber prices have changed, but I built a sauna of it was about a 5 by 7 wood burning sauna in a detached shop of mine in Minnesota, and this was done for $1,000. And so again, it was not anything fancy, but you know what? I loved it. I built it, and I did have a nice welded, non-name brand stove from a kid that welded it from the tech college. So I do miss part of that kind of entrepreneurial. Hey, I'm choosing to build a cool sauna instead of do something else. But I am on a budget, and I want to enjoy the best things of it. So make sure you're getting a good amount of rocks on a heated mass, and sit above them and throw some water on them. And if you can hold that heat in the room, you're going to have a good time.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I think to your comment of, if you are savvy with construction, I would say I'm not. I have an engineer desk job. Luckily, my dad is savvy with construction, but it's a safe enough endeavor that you can learn to get savvy with construction. You know, it's small enough, you can make those mistakes. I mean, there's some expensive mistakes that are annoying to be made, but it really is a great DIY learning experience to go on YouTube and learn framing basics and then learn how to lay out roofing. Even if you aren't DIY naturally, it's really a great place to start. And there's
And
something valuable. I mean, I'm going to be proud of the sauna I built, but it's also great because Haley got pictures of me with my dad, up on the roof, putting on the sheathing. And so there's those memories being made as part of it too, instead of, and again, I understand there's limitations for certain people, and some people have time or body restrictions where they just need a sauna delivered, and that's great. There's a space for that. But if you have the desire to do it yourself, but there's this overwhelming fear of diving into something, I also had that, and I just called up the lumber yard and said, "All right, drop off X amount of cedar deck boards and some treated lumber," and I just started on it and was like, "Here we go."
I love it.
The one thing that creates a lot of discussion nowadays is ventilation. And there's a lot of people out there who know everything about ventilation, but we all agree on one thing. You need air inside your sauna, and you have to get rid of the CO2. Having said that, for the past 3 days, the sauna I've been using, you can basically see through the door because the blanks are so wide apart. So there's your ventilation right
Sure.
there. It's not a little hole there somewhere where it's supposed to be, and if you don't have it that very spot, you're screwed. That's not how it
Yeah.
used to work back in the day.
Isn't the gap underneath the sauna door too a design that people have? Like there's like a small gap just underneath the door.
Yeah.
I tend to sign up or subscribe to that philosophy. I've always had a wood burning stove, so I need a good amount of air so that can feed that fire. So a gap underneath my door really feeds my stove because I can stand there. I know it's feeding it too, because if I'm standing there and I'm good and sweaty, my feet are wet, I can feel that cold air rushing right across the floor, getting pulled right into the stove. So I know there's a plenty of fresh air getting circulated and moved around. And more the better.
That's one thing, when I first got into sauna, we're recording our family's podcast where we go through from the beginning of getting into sauna and chronologically go through. So I'm having the opportunity to re-experience those lessons we learned. And it took a few years before ventilation was on our radar even. And so now we're about to record an episode where we used a sauna in Canada. It didn't feel right in there, but it's hard to put your thumb on what that was, and it was up in the UP where I first heard I like a drafty sauna. And that really kind of punctuated my experiences. And it sounded weird at first, but if you get those basic principles right, with lots of rocks like Sam talked about, and a good hardy stove to heat your sauna, then ventilation, you can have more freedom with that. And fresh air is wonderful in sauna.
Yeah.
So I'm always the party pooper, but we didn't even scratch the surface here. But I'm afraid we are getting to the end of the this
Yeah,
episode. So
I could easily see how we could go, another hour or two. So no, this has been wonderful.
It's been fun to talk about these things. I mean, you know, sauna complexities, all the things you can broach, so many things.
any final thoughts?
We didn't touch on this. I'm super excited for your book and for your sauna build project, so I'll follow along those definitely. But we didn't touch on the fact that I think you're a musician, right?
Yeah, Cody and I both play music. Yeah.
Have you written any sauna songs?
I have not written any sauna songs actually. I could totally though. I mean, there's a lot you could write about. Yeah, it wouldn't be unheard of to write a sauna song.
I think it would be great to, obviously in this situation, for the instrument's sake, you wouldn't have the sauna fired up, but to
Just-
have an album live from the upper bench,
My gosh.
that sounds like an album right there.
I mean,
Arrow is our resident musician. So
what do you
no,
play,
I
Arrow?
stick to golf.
I'm a guitar player. I've
Okay.
played guitar most of my life, and I actually, without my wife's consent, I bought a guitar for Finland alone. So I bought a new guitar here. I've got plenty of instruments in New York, but anyway, so and I'm actually going. I'm not going to tell the whole story yet, but I will hit the studio first time in my life this fall.
Feel free to use my idea of the name Live from the Upper bench. That is yours to take.
Oh, yeah.
They back in the day in Finland, they used to record in saunas because of the acoustics. So some of the, with the wooden interior and stuff, so it might work, wonders, depending obviously the size of the sauna. But yeah, I'm afraid it's not gonna be live from the upper bench, but working on it. Hopefully you're gonna be hearing from
One
me.
day.
Thank you so much. I'm sure that you guys gonna come back to our show. And when your sauna is done and when your book is out and everything, it's been a blast. Thank you so much. And it's almost 8:30 in the evening here in the mid part of Finland, but as you can still, we got little clouds here, but it's still very, very clear and shiny outside.
Thank you
Yeah.
guys. It's been a pleasure.
Risto here. I'm excited to announce the Upper Bench's first sauna meetup. Arrow, Sam, and I have been talking about getting together with listeners for quite some time. Well, we finally decided to schedule it. We talked about doing an East Coast sauna circuit, or going to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, or even meeting in Finland. But our final choice is perhaps the best sauna city in North America. This city has Nordic spas, mobile saunas, and tons of excellent banyas. Perhaps you've guessed by now, we're going to Toronto. We're still in the planning stages, but the dates are set for November 7th through 10th. We plan on meeting up with the Finnish contingent, going to my favorite banya, getting some Venic treatments, meeting y'all, and having a bowl of top-notch Chinese noodles. If you're curious to get more details, you can sign up for the email list at our website, theupperbench.com, and let us know if you have any suggestions. So get your passport renewed, get a good Banya hat, and stay tuned for more info. We look forward to steaming with you in November.